There's been a lot of talk about climate change and the fear of climate change, and not surprisingly, it's kind of dominated the news media over the last 10 years, particularly, I think. And almost inconsistently as well, there's a parallel rise in artificial intelligence, and that seems to be embraced without a second thought. And it struck me that the two are totally incompatible. Fearing climate change and embracing artificial intelligence at the same time, it's inconsistent really, because both are kind of existential, well, very existential for the human race, but the latter even more so. AI is probably more of an existential issue for us. Climate change, and it's been said before, the Earth is not going to suffer from climate change. We will be wiped out, but the Earth won't. The Earth will survive it, and it'll go through the natural cycles that it's been doing for millennia. However, with AI and artificial intelligence, that is a totally different scenario. If human beings are replaced by machines, which is entirely possible, it's happening already in terms of menial jobs are being replaced by machines now, and then less menial jobs all the time are going to be replaced by machines. Professional jobs, there's talk of, the AI lawyer. So professional jobs like lawyers are being replaced already by AI. Truck drivers will be the next to go, bus drivers, all of that sort of stuff, with autonomous driving cars and machinery. And that's just the physical replacement of our duties and our worth. But the whole other level then is where our intelligence becomes inferior to machines. And I think that stage, from what I can see, is not too far off. Exponential rise in artificial intelligence and the growth being exponential is the scariest thing of all, because the more it grows, the faster it grows. That's the nature of an exponential. I'm recording here on thunder and lightning, so there's been thunders, flash of lightning as well. It's kind of suitable. I think they call it pathetic fallacy, isn't it? Better check that. Pathetic fallacy, where nature is in tune with the topic of the environment and in poetry and stuff like that. So, and I'm not going to look that up. And that's another issue that I was thinking of. Already in society, you would be having a conversation with somebody, and something I've noticed a lot. You have a conversation with somebody and you might ask them, I've asked people innocently, I've said, oh yeah, what is the story with X? And they go, well, sure, look it up. Why not look it up? Google it. And I think they're missing the whole point, because first of all, I'm not really asking for the information. I'm starting a conversation, of just a discussion, just would have happened, and nothing necessarily wrong with these people. It might be friends or just acquaintances, but there's a bonding in just asking about a topic. Be it your opinion on it, or have you heard the latest on it, or something like that. But now, increasingly, people seem to assume that we should be outsourcing all of that discussion and inquiry about anything to the machine, be it Google. God, that thunderous rain now, thunderstorm is coming in. It's a pathetic fallacy. So that we should be outsourcing all of that, any use of our brains at all, or any source of investigation or inquiry, to the machine, to artificial intelligence, that bank of knowledge, and we should just defer to that, rather than, for centuries, millennia, as humans, we've talked to each other and we've asked each other questions, and we've probed topics and subjects to learn from each other, to debate with each other, and to build up a new perspective and to connect. And increasingly, I've found that is being completely undermined. People are willingly kind of almost shocked if you ask them a question about something, because they say, well, why don't you put that into Google and get the factual response back? And we're actually dispensing, I think, with that discussion about information. And another thing that's occurred to me, and it's kind of slightly related, and I think it's a sign of how the dominance of the machine in society is when you're out with people in a pub or some other social setting, 4 or 5 people, and you ask them about somebody. There's a general conversation, as there always is. And it's in real life. You're meeting actual humans, which is such a precious thing nowadays, even more precious as time goes by. But somebody says, oh, have you seen this thing, on the internet or something? And you say no. And what? Oh my God. And they put it into Google or they put it into YouTube and start playing the video, and then they put it in front of you or everybody. And it struck me, it's happening more and more often now, but this is really about an etiquette thing, because the word etiquette kind of makes me cringe. It's something far more profound than that. It's like the invasion of a real life discussion, a connection, and it's an automatic thought that we're now going to divert all of that, all of this bonding and connection in real life, connection, actually looking at each other and talking to each other and finding out information about each other. We're going to divert it all to the machine, where this person is not even just asking you, do you want to see it? People don't even ask that. They say, have you seen this? And if you say you haven't, they'll play it automatically, a YouTube clip or something like that. And the automatic assumption is we'll now divert all of our discussion to this. And it happened to me even with an older person. I was staying in a bed and breakfast and I was just chatting, but the type of chat that you do to bond with somebody. It was an elderly lady who ran this B&B, bed and breakfast. And I said, oh yeah, about this type of music, and she said, oh, have you not seen it? And she played the YouTube video and left it on the table for me and walks off. And it's like I'm now outsourcing any source of human connection now to the machine. You are now, this, and increasingly that's another thing that is happening increasingly more often, I think, on chat groups and stuff like that, and WhatsApp groups. There are people who will never write in anything into a chat group, like how are you, how are things going, how are people doing, would people like to meet up, that kind of stuff. The chat groups are designed for, or were originally, I think. All they do is put in memes, that they found on the internet. So like things that they allegedly find funny and assume that people are going to enjoy as well. Usually it's something you've probably seen 100 times before, but again, it bewilders me that there's such a rarity in human connection nowadays. And even the one time that they might have to choose to say, how are you, how is everybody, or something like that, or whatever, they outsource it and say, right, I'm not capable of being funny myself, so I'm going to outsource that humor or connection to somebody else on the internet who's generated usually some crap, let's face it, and I'm going to send that to everybody. And that is, I cannot understand it, that is their way of communicating. It's not communicating, really, but it's entirely outsourcing your personality to the machine, when you think about it fundamentally. And people don't. I'm conscious that I might be the only one who's kind of thinking about this, and I don't think it's just that I'm being an angry old man kind of thing. I think it's actually, there's something kind of disturbing about it. That increasingly, and I don't think it's a paranoia thing, I think it's just actually happening. We're outsourcing our personalities, we're outsourcing our humor, we're outsourcing our connection, we're outsourcing discussion, discovery, all of that to the machine. And don't get me wrong, I use the internet. I don't live in a mud hut and send pigeons to people. I do use the internet. It is a resource, it's entertaining, it's enlightening. But I think definitely where the line is crossed is where people are doing that in public environment. When you're meeting people in real life, and it's like, okay, well, I'm not capable of talking about this with you, or describing it, or connecting with you about it, or doing an inquiry. I'm going to totally outsource it to the machine. The machine will play the video or whatever it is, and that will be my substitute way of communicating with you. So that is, I mean, artificial intelligence is, people are talking about the rise of it, particularly with ChatGPT, but I think it's been happening for a long time now. I mean, really, we are already outsourcing our brains to a machine in our pocket. Our phones in our pocket really now are additional RAM and memory and processing power that we have latched on. I mean, it may not be interfaced with our brains directly now, but it's indirectly, it certainly is. And we're outsourcing more and more. And I think the bit that it worries me the most about the outsourcing is where it's substituting human connection, and it certainly is, because that certainly was never intended as a way to improve our lives, and I certainly don't think it has. But the real one that's drawn our attention is ChatGPT, and I think that is the one that really is quite shocking, because nobody was talking about it this time last year. Most people would have heard of ChatGPT, only it's May now, they would have heard about it maybe 6 months ago. And in that amount of time, the colonization of ChatGPT and AI in general of the world has been pretty shocking. And that is just in the first 6 months. And we've got to remember, this is an exponential curve. And exponentials are scary. People don't naturally understand them. People understand linear phenomena, whereby you push something and it goes a certain distance. You push it with twice the severity and it goes twice the distance. But exponentials are not like that. You push it a certain amount and it goes a certain distance. You push it another, just the equal amount, and it goes way up. And a non-linear one is where you get a radical change, very sudden change with a small difference in input. And that's why the exponential, it's dire in climate change as well, because the climate and our atmosphere and environment is a non-linear system. So that is going to cause problems for us as well. But I think we are people who are being very concerned about climate and enabling AI at the same time are fooling themselves. Because if we put the same effort into AI that we are and divert all of the hysteria into climate change, then we are doomed either way. Because AI, I think, will have an equally catastrophic effect on the human race as climate change will have. Because we could be living in an environment where the machine is now several orders of intelligence higher than we are, because the exponential growth. And it's not just the random access memory element of it, it's the nature of the neural network in our brains and how human beings and children learn is being fundamentally disrupted by machine interaction. Because the way we learn, certainly as children, is we make a mistake, we do something, we make a mistake, we get a feedback from it, and a neural network fires and tells us, right, to remember that the next time. We adapt, and we get kind of an image of the world, a kind of a pattern, and we put it all together, and it grows in our mind, and it fires the right neural network in order to re-solidify that learning. Particularly with a language, you hear words being put together, you match it. We're great pattern matchers in the brain. You know, Thon, I'm sure go Hanish and and then you match it with the awful weather outside, and you associate those words with and sounds with the environment outside, and before you know it, you've learned Irish or whatever language it might be. Now what's happening is the ability to make mistakes is being stripped out of life. I mean, one, for instance, is the ability to get lost on a journey. And this is just a fundamental one, a really kind of trivial example, but it was always a growing experience to go to somewhere new and to travel around and to get lost. And some of the best stories on people's holidays would be traveling to Barcelona, not having the right map, taking a wrong turn. Taking Barcelona, you probably get mugged. But there's always something happy that will happen. You'll meet somebody, you'll probably meet your future wife or something like that, and you meet a fantastic musician, or you stumble on some great work of art. You have a random extemporaneous event that happens to you that hasn't been planned, that hasn't a structure to it, which is all of the kind of randomness that holidays were all about. But now, with so much machine work to guide us in the right way, those machines and Google Maps are robbing us of fantastic experience, and nobody is probably considering that. I think most people will probably think it's just stripping out a kind of an unnecessary, it's making our lives better. It's but the ability to get lost, and this is just one example, which I'm sure is probably replicated across the board, where AI is robbing our ability of our neural network to train itself, to learn by making mistakes, to screw up, to go down that dead end, to have to reverse and to refire and generate a kind of a map, like a neural network as well. And I remember seeing once at a conference, seeing an overall view, a night view of a city, and it was shockingly, it was like exactly a neuron in the brain. It has a nucleus with the lights in the city, and then these tentacles going out with further tentacles from that, exactly like a neural network, which kind of comes back to how our entire universe is like the same thing replicated on different scales. It's like our cities just basically a hologram of our brains. That's for another day. But we take it for granted now, and people will get upset if you're not using Google Maps to find a place, or if you're late because you got lost. How could you get lost? Because the machine will tell you where to go. The ability to make mistakes, that is going to be quite disruptive to especially children growing up in an environment where they're making their ability and freedom to go through the beauty and chaos of making a mistake has been robbed from them. That is going to be particularly disruptive and damaging. But far more on top of that, I think, and the icing on the cake is ChatGPT. And I suppose the trivial element now, relatively trivial, I think, in comparison to the fundamental of how our brains being able to work in a chaotic, like our brains do not learn linearly. They don't, you don't just learn a list of things. Our brain learns kind of in terms of a week. It generates a week kind of map of what needs to be learned first, and then reinforces it, and as the need is there in a kind of a non-linear way, and it's like it fills in the painting. And that can only really be done by trial and error and by mistake and feedback. But now all of that is being disruptive, and our brains will never thank us for that, I believe. But ChatGPT has exploded over the last 6 months, and seeing the way it's growing as well, and consuming the information on the internet, and it's replacing education, like probably not in a good way. I mean, it probably feasible now to write an entire thesis outsourced to ChatGPT, and not that necessary. That's probably just the kind of I suppose the more headline issue of it. But the real issue of how that affects us is going to be much more deeper, I think. It's replacement of the human as opposed to as regards what our duties, our ability to work, but it's also a sort of a displacement of the natural ways that we behave as people. And it's going to cause severe disruption, possibly very negative disruption to us as AI grows. So there are my thoughts on artificial intelligence, and there's a lot of hypocrisy, I think, around the noise about that we need to do something about climate change, and yet silence on AI. And a lot of the climate change sort of narrative and all that, and the papers that are written about climate change will probably be churned out by AI. That's the irony of it. in the future. You will have the machine telling us about how worried we should be about climate change and not about itself. See you next time.